Our discussion that I already said, like, I don't really have that much more. Started off as a PG podcast, but then Devin just kept on dropping shits and fucks, and
I'm just trying to figure out what's in her mouth.
I just want to see him interview Francesco Accoli.
No, he's a good human being, is what he would say about himself, I'm sure.
Who's hosting this thing?
Take charge, Kevin, would you? Jesus.
First time we ever met those guys. That was the major drunken pub argument.
I think you guys are the worst.
I'm gonna have to probably watch some Canucks hockey, unfortunately.
Just making friends left, right, and center, and probably some enemies as well.
Tell him to shut up. He needs to hear that every once in a while.
Off to a good start.
All right. We are live.
It's okay to talk when it goes live.
It sure is. And talking we will do. Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. We are live on Facebook, on YouTube.com, the Hockey Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at podcast_hockey. We have a website, by the way, that I've never mentioned, but we do have, called thehockeypodcast.com. And of course, you can subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts, which includes Google, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are sold. I'm going to start off with some Raptors news, Tyler. Hello, okay. Tyler. Nick Nurse has been fined $50,000 for swearing and throwing a mask. How much would your dad fine Devin for swearing on this podcast?
As much as he can get out of him. $2,000.
$2,000.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Just enough to send a message. Well, in all seriousness, that of that 50,000, there probably 49 of it's to do with throwing the mask. But
probably,
yeah.
To be fair, I would think so, yes. Things are well.
Yeah, things are all right here. It's kind of got that gloomy look outside today, but it's warming up. It's feeling a little closer to spring. It's nice.
Fair enough. How's it? Who's that guy in the bottom left on the corner there in the white shirt?
Yeah, just
it looks familiar. Chris is your name?
Yeah, I figured I'd come back.
What? Been busy? What's going on?
Yeah, life has just been quite a bit hectic the past couple of weeks, and just wasn't able to make scheduling work. But I'm here, so let's talk hockey.
We miss you, Sean, right, Sean? We miss Chris.
Oh yeah, I miss Chris all the time. We were talking earlier this week about how we haven't really seen each other in person in months. So after this podcast is all set and done, we're going to meet up for some social distancing outdoor beers to enjoy the nice weather here in Calgary.
This fall spring that we're currently enjoying.
Yes.
Devin is not going to be here. We will have him on Tuesday. So I'm sure as soon as I bring up the words Matthew and Kachuk, the swearing quotient will be up on behalf of Devin at some particular.
I'll pick up his slack.
Yeah, as soon as I say those two words, will rise, I'm sure. We'll start Canucks though. 3 out of 4 points in Montreal. They have 2 more games against the Winnipeg Jets, and then they are off for a week. No PD. We have our Canucks poll question. And by the way, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. We'll get to them. Should the Canucks buy at the trade deadline? As they talked about that on the highlights or on headlines yesterday on Hockey Night in Canada. Should they buy? Should they sell, or do neither? The Canucks were apparently in sell mode, but this hot streak put them back into a different mode. What say you? We'll start with Chris and then go Sean, then Tyler.
I was more amused by the fact that he actually said the word constipation live on TV. But maybe that's just my level of humor. But yeah, getting back to the change of strategy for the Canucks, it definitely is putting a different twist on things than what I think a lot of people had planned for. That said, whether it's for the betterment of the team in the long run remains to be seen. That's something we'll just find out with things progressing. But yeah, I definitely don't see Tanner Pearson going anywhere now, especially with the injury. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Sean, what say you?
I want them to selectively buy. I want them to be looking for players that can help them not only this season, but going forwards. I want to see them find a way to pick up players that can help them grow in the next 2-3 years when things are back to normal. They're back in the Pacific Division, and they're not trying to climb out of a gigantic China length deep hole that they put themselves in with this season. They basically almost dug themselves to China, is what I'm trying to say, with the start of their season, and they need to trying to climb out, even with the streak that they're on, and winning at the rate that they need to win for basically almost the rest of the season. Right now, I'm still on the edge of saying whether or not it's going to happen or they can stay in the race going forwards. But if they can find a way to selectively buy and selectively sell at the same time, I'd be happy. But prefer for them to try and start building for next year and beyond.
On the poll question, I said neither. I definitely don't think they should be buying. Selectively buying, though, I mean, is there's some merits there depending on, are we renting? Are you going to get a guy for beyond this season? What's the cap hit? You have to consider all those things. I mean, if there's a good buy out there to be had, sure. But in general, I don't think they should be buying. If they honestly believe in this team and they're still going to stick with the general manager and they're going to do all these things that they've talked about before, whether it was the owner in his Twitter run or Jim Benning with the press conference a few weeks ago, then stay the course. If they really believe in this core, stick with it. Selling it off and then falling short of the playoffs and kind of fizzling out towards the end of the season is not something that I'm really that interested in seeing. But, as we sit here today, the odds are still pretty long for them to make the playoffs. So right now I'm sitting on the fence with neither, but if they're going to do one or the other, I'd like to see them reposition for next year as opposed to buying.
I also voted neither. I don't think the Canucks have enough to give up to really, really go out and buy. Anyway, I don't think that there's a lot of value in selling much at this particular point. As Chris mentioned, Tanner Pearson being out, that's probably someone that's not going to be selling anyway. Jordy Ben, I guess, would be another one that you could look at, and that's an interesting dilemma. There are teams that you would want a veteran defenseman. Maybe even Devon's Leafs would be one of those guys, or Parallax Prophecies Jets maybe. But I don't know if you get a lot for that. And then maybe a Braden Holtby. I mean, I guess that depends on if you really think the Seattle Kraken are going to take him or not, but maybe. So to me, selling, there's not an option. I think if you do anything, I think the priority is you do anything you do, either you do the gym, find a Jimmy Vesey waiver pickup. Travis Boyd, by the way, is on waivers today. That might be someone that I don't know comes back to Toronto. And I think maybe the biggest priority, if I'm the Canucks, I think the priority for this team is sign Travis Green. That has to be, you've got to get that done. And that to me has got to be your number one priority in terms of what you get done at this deadline. And I know that that's not a player, but that is someone important for this franchise.
The one thing I want to sort of combat with you there on, Kev, is just because you're not getting much back doesn't mean you shouldn't sell. If you can get someone to take on Sutter and get a 3rd, 4th round, 5th round pick, great. Guess who was drafted in that range after the Canucks acquired a pick that they used on him? Adam Gaudette.
Mm-hmm.
That pick, the pick that they used to select Adam Gaudette, was a 5th round pick that they acquired for flipping Rafael Diaz to the Rangers at the deadline.
Player 61.
Yeah, I guess to me, I know that everybody's saying long shot, and I even said long shot as well, but I look at this North Division, and I legitimately think that the Canucks have a chance to go as far, and forgive me with the hot take, as far as 3rd place, possibly. So they have a chance to get in the playoffs, and they possibly could win 1 round. I would not be surprised. I think that this division is that close. I don't think that this is one of those things that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to run away with, or the Winnipeg Jets are going to run away with. So that's why I'm like, I think that if you are selling, I think that you should be trying to sell higher than just get a 5th round pick and be done with it. I think you have to kind of look at it and say, at the very least, I think the priority needs to be legitimate, solid hockey trades or shrewd pickups.
Well, they'd have to be selling a pretty big name then to get any return, Kevin, because the peripheral pieces. I mean, we've talked every week around here about how they're underperforming. So, I think to Sean's point, and it's something that's come up at trade deadlines and off season in the past with the Canucks, and just underwhelming return or no return for assets and having them walk freely. But I do think there is a bit of an organizational philosophy with players that served them for a long time, or that had a fairly big role with the team, that they don't want to just sell them off for a bag of pucks. So, yes, you want to try and get something back in the draft because the picks are useful, but you bring up Brandon Sutter. I mean, I think the organization's pretty high on Brandon Sutter. I don't think they want to just dispatch him for a 6th or 7th round pick. I think they have more of a desire to come up with something better than that.
Also, Kev, despite our current winning ways of the past 10 or so games, let's see if you're still this optimistic after a week off when every other team is caught up in games played and are likely significantly ahead of us in the standings, and will probably only be ahead of Ottawa.
The only thing about that, I think, is just that there's no automatics here. Like we've seen, even in the games against Ottawa, there's no automatics. I mean, the 2 teams that have not lost to Ottawa are Edmonton and Vancouver, if I have it right, and I don't know about Winnipeg, but Montreal and Toronto. So Toronto's supposedly the best team, right? We think, and they're having some trouble with Ottawa. So, there's nothing certain, and a lot of how the standings will fold depends on how many games go to overtime, right? And that was something that we, as Canuck followers, were not hoping to see with the 2 games against Montreal this weekend.
Yeah, one team's going to win and one team is going to lose, and I think that's just going to depend. I don't think games in hand are. The way that I look at games in hand is yes, some team may have games in hand, but I would look at it as what is their winning percentage now? So if their winning percentage is, if they're winning, if it's 2, I think 2 out of 4, there's a possibility of 4 points. Okay, you can add 4 points to that, but I don't think that means that they're going to blow way ahead necessarily. I think the one negative with the Canucks, the one problem is the possibility of 3-point games, I think hurts. But that doesn't mean that I think that the Canucks are necessarily dead in the water.
No, they just got to keep winning the games in front of them, as you've talked about.
Yeah.
And by no means am I on Team Tank. I was just basically trying to be let's not be too optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, this whole year is an odd situation. If the Canucks were to get into the playoffs, I think it's going to be a pretty challenging path. I sure hope that the ownership's not sitting there saying, "Oh, this is our chance at a Stanley Cup this year," and really believe in that. I mean, they got to be looking towards next year and beyond. But still, compete and try and stay in the race and make a go of it here, and have this young core continue to develop.
In that week off, the Canucks. Well, let's see. The Canucks have 2 games against Winnipeg, and then they've got a week off. Within that, the Flames are playing the Jets 3 games during that week off for the Canucks, and the Habs finish off a 3-game set versus the Oilers, and then play 2 games versus the Senators. So those are the those 2 to 3 teams are the ones you're looking at in terms of who the Canucks would be chasing if they're going to make that run. And what happens in those games will be huge. And if less 3-point games, the better, for sure. But if they play 500 hockey between those teams, game here or there, I can't really do it with 3 games. You can do it with 3 games. That's a 500. That's a 3-point game though. But if they play around that opens the door big time for the Canucks if they can find a way to continue to win at the rate they're currently winning at. But if one of those teams, say the Flames or the Habs, find a way to win all of them, then that really hurts the Canucks' chances and really puts a damper on what their chances are.
Yeah, I mean, it would make it more. Yeah, I agree with that, and I think, yeah, and as I have said, I look at this North Division, and we talked about that even with on the midweek intermission with the Jets as well. I just think this whole division is flawed. I don't see a team that is a real super competitive team. I mean, you look at the Leafs as an example. They've got interesting questions in goal. The Oilers, if they don't get production from McDavid and Draisaitl, do they have a chance? The Jets, I mean, they've been the most consistent, but you look at that defense, basically, again, that's another question there. The Flames, we've seen the flaws. The Canucks have flaws, and the Senators are the Senators. So I don't know. I don't know. I think sometimes in Canucks Twitter, it feels cool to be negative, but I don't know if you necessarily need to be as negative on the Canucks playoff chances as people are out there.
For me, like my expectations are that it's a long shot, but I'm excited to see if they can find a way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I'm excited to watch these games and see if they can find a way to scrape and claw and get back into it to a point where it's not a long shot. We're actually at a coin flip spot here for them. If they can do that, that's fantastic. That's entertaining. What we watch hockey to be entertained. That'd be amazing.
And also moralizing for the team.
Mm-hmm.
And you're building something for the future.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think last week
going-
was an example of that. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, going back to the buy sell idea, yes, what the Canucks have to sell isn't necessarily big. They're not going to get a good return for it, unless they're going, because to help them long term, they have to move on from a couple contracts. But no one's taking on Antoine Roussel. I doubt anyone's taking Jake Virtanen at this point. Then you've got Brandon Sutter's a UFA. And then on the blue line, you've got Jordy Ben's a realistic trade option. I think you could get a mid-round pick for him. They've got some decent depth for the 5, 6, 7, 8 defenseman area. But the other options on the blue line are Travis Hamonic and Alexander Edler. Guess what? They've got no movement clauses. They're not going anywhere unless they want to. So the sell is hard, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't look at what you can get for Brandon Sutter. Is Brandon Sutter going to be with this team long term? Is Brandon Sutter the 3C long term for this team? That's why I'm saying that they should be looking at finding ways to improve this team long term. If they can add a 4th, 5th round pick for Brandon Sutter, that's an asset they can use to help maybe move up in the draft, get a player they like better in the mid rounds. They can use that to maybe flip for another player in the off season or sweeten the deal on a bigger deal. Like it's assets. It's not necessarily sell for to draft. It's sell to use to help build your team later on.
Absolutely. Well, I think in terms of the decision with Brandon Sutter, if they stick to the idea of JT Miller as a center, that plays a pretty big influence on the decision as well. Again, the organization, they paid a pretty good price to, as in high price to get Brandon Sutter. They made him an alternate captain. They seem to really like him. They like what he does. In terms of defensive play, penalty killing, etc. So it wouldn't surprise me if they try to bring him back. But yeah, if you have JT Miller as a center, and then you still got Gaudette and Petey and Bo Horvat and whoever else that they might plug in for the fourth line down the line, whether that's Beagle or somebody else, where does Brandon Sutter fit in? It's either on the wing or elsewhere, I guess. So we'll see how that one shakes out.
If you're trading, let's just toss a scenario out. If you're trading Brandon Sutter to Edmonton, is there any particular thing that you would like from the Oilers for Brandon Sutter that's not named Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl?
I said, just get a pick for him. Get a pick that you can use to maybe add a player elsewhere, or use to draft a player and develop them, or use elsewhere. Get a pick.
Because next year, if you basically take the same forward group and plug in Vasily Podkolzin, I think people would be okay with that. I think they'd be happy with that.
I want to see them do some more tweaking and shuffling around in that bottom six. That bottom six is not good enough for the Canucks going forwards. I think adding a Podkolzin would help push players down into better roles for them, or he plays on the third line type deal. But they need to do some tweaking around that, and that again, that's why Brandon Sutter's expendable, even if you're trying to push for a playoff spot this year.
Yeah,
we don't.
If you have JT Miller at center and you're going Horvat, Petey, Miller down the middle, and Jay Beagle comes back, he's your fourth line center. Then you've got Howlark's been a nice addition. He's looked good since he finally became healthy again. Jimmy Vesey's a good pickup. They've got the wingers for the fourth line. They don't necessarily need to move Brandon Sutter to the wing to play on the fourth line, because they don't have wingers to do that.
Yeah, I think going forward, you got to keep JT Miller at center for sure. The question is, I guess, then looking at that left side for the Canucks, you have VC, which we'll talk about in a second. You've got Mott, who I'm a big fan of, but I don't know if you're putting him higher than second line. Pearson's out for 6 weeks. You could probably put Höglander on the left. That's not bad, but I wouldn't mind from the Canucks perspective. It would be a good add to see if you could add to that if you were going to. That would be
again. This is not I hate just focusing on this year with this team, because this year this core is young. This core, you should be trying to figure out how you can build long term.
I'm still talking even long term. You still are going to have to fill out that left side. I do think that is. I mean, you've got Podkolzin, but Podkolzin is a rookie and a prospect. There's probably you probably wouldn't mind getting another veteran there. Is Tanner Pearson coming back? Do we know that or not? Right. So I do think the left side, long term, there needs to be some improvement there for sure.
Oh, they do, but again, that's long term. That's stuff you can handle in the off season. You don't need to go and hamstring yourself and focus and do a Jim Benning, because that's what he does. He has tunnel vision on this, and goes in and tries to try and just pick up a veteran at the deadline for this. No, I want him to look long term. I want him to look next year and beyond. If he is actually saying that, yes, in 2 years this team could be a contender for the cup, then you need to be looking at that term. You can't be looking at this season and going, we need a veteran to help our push to our long shot push to make the playoffs.
No, I think we're both saying the same thing. I think if you're making a trade, it's a hockey trade, and I think from a positional point, that would be my focus. And you can do that. You can build something. You can get something now and help long term. Awesome, is my point. I think I'm making sense.
I don't think it's. I don't think that's where we differ, Kevin. I don't think it needs to be a hockey trade. I think picking up a draft pick is fine. Is actually good, because then you're not then you're not you don't have the you're not giving the option of locking this next veteran down long term to a deal that potentially could be another Brandon Sutter, Antoine Roussel type deal that is hampering how they can build around this team.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Tyler was going to say something.
Yeah, I we've seen enough of it over the last few years where they're plugging in veterans at a premium to help the young core come along. Well, I think we're at the point where the young core is ready to take the reins. So, they got to stop this trend of overpaying veterans to be role players. I mean, I think that's important. I don't think you can just throw out a bunch of inexperienced guys and hope that they succeed, but, within reason here.
Yeah, we don't want to compound the problem.
Yeah.
So Jimmy VC was picked up here on waivers. He got an opportunity on the shootout last night.
Mm-hmm.
What do we think?
I like it. Well, he's been better than a bunch of the players who have been playing in that bottom 9 role or middle 6 role. Like, I think it's a great pickup. Give him some more time to get his feet under him, learn the systems, learn the tendencies of his new teammates, and I think he's going to be a nice middle 6, third line player for the Canucks.
Yeah, like, he doesn't blow your socks off, but he's decently well at what he does, and I think he can contribute.
Helpful acquisition and a timely acquisition as well with Petey being out and now Tanner Pearson going down as well. They need Jimmy VC, so it was a good get off the waiver wire. Certainly.
Yeah.
Liked what I've seen so far.
Yeah, shrewd move. Hope he's able to get his car back from Ottawa. But we'll let him figure that out. A solid pickup. Guy you can put in the lineup. And I don't think that there's it's not going to blow you away, but blow your socks off. But also, what did we think of Braden Holtby?
He was fine last night. It wasn't his fault that they lost that game. Most of the goals were through two or three screens. I would say there's one goal I didn't quite like. But again, he was still screened. The Canucks need to be better around their goaltenders. Thatcher Demko's playing lights out. Like, you can't expect your other goalie to do it as well. So they need to shore some things up on the systems, and Holtby's game won't be as contentious with Canucks fans going forward if they do that.
I think it was the tying goal last night, the 4-4 goal, was it, that they lost the face-off and it was shot, so was it by Gallagher? Yeah. I mean, those ones are tough too, right? You need a face-off there to lose it clean, and have a play like that is a tough one for the goalie as well. No, I thought Holtby gave them a great effort. It is concerning when he hasn't played in so long how he's going to perform, but it looked like he was very hungry to prove himself last night. And, even though the Canucks didn't win, it was very encouraging for me to see them not crumble when they fell behind or were hit with a little bit of adversity. They showed a lot of mental toughness last night, I thought. Yeah,
and Holtby was definitely serviceable last night. Like, that last couple seconds in overtime, dramatic save to make sure that we went to the shootout. Like, he did decently well. He's not playing at Demko type numbers, but Demko is playing damn near Vezina quality right now. So. Yeah, he's been decently well despite his lack of game time.
Mm-hmm.
I did say that Thatcher Demko right now is the best goalie in the North. Like, he is playing the best in the North.
I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like in terms of sample size. I mean, everyone can argue something, but right now, if we're playing, I would say it's Demko.
Demko's arguably playing the best in the whole NHL as a goaltender.
No, just in regards to the goaltending decision, I imagine there's a few people out there who might still be questioning the choice of going with Demko for the game last night. I mean, you can look at it a couple of ways. I think the old coach mentality is that every game's important, so I don't think that Travis Green is saying, well, this particular game against Montreal is more of a must-win than any of the other ones down the line. But the schedule is what it is. I think it's just too risky to keep running Demko out there. Back-to-back nights, then a travel day back to Vancouver, and then right back into it against Winnipeg on Monday. I think that was just asking too much of a young goaltender. So Holtby had to step in, and as we've talked about, he gave them a pretty good performance, and we'll see Demko now for the next 2 games, I'm sure.
And riding a goalie consistently doesn't necessarily get you anywhere. Look at how that worked out for the Flames with Markstrom at the start of the season.
Hell, look at the Canucks with Markstrom last year.
Yeah.
That was the right call. It was, and Holtby put up a great effort. Like I said, there was a lot of little things that were the issues outside of his control that led to the goals, and it was I was just screaming like the Canucks need to give Holtby run support. They did, but they also didn't. They had too many mistakes in the defensive zone that led to goals. But yeah, that decision was right. As Tyler said, it's back to back. You've got a long flight that the Canucks are going on right now to get back home. And then you've got 2 very key games against Winnipeg leading into their week-long break. If they can find a way to, again, if they can find a way to get 3 or 4 points out of this versus Winnipeg, that will go huge into helping them set themselves up to come out of that break looking as good as possible.
Yeah, I just, I think back-to-backs, I think typically you should split them. I don't think that there's any question. I don't have a problem with playing Holtby at all, especially with this schedule. I was thinking about this. This is maybe silly, but I wonder going forward how much back-to-backs. I would like to see that reduced in future schedules. I just don't think that it's always quality hockey that you're getting, especially if you have to travel. Even as ridiculous as Calgary to Edmonton isn't too bad. I mean, you're playing the game, you're traveling overnight. You got to get into your hotel. It's not always easy. I would like to see that reduced. And I think, back-to-backs, I think 80-90% of the time you should play the other goalie. I don't think goalies should be playing back-to-back. But I overall think that the NHL, I would like to see a reduction on back-to-back games overall, if at all possible.
If we're talking the last week of the season here and they're still in contention and they need every possible point here, then I would look at that and say, no, you got to keep riding the hot hand. But at this stage, no, taking chances with Demko going down because he's been overworked is, not something they should be doing.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess the other, just one more thing I wanted to just quickly ask about, because this has been one of Sean's B's and his bottom, is not having Mikey DiPietro playing any games. Should one of the other things that the Canucks prioritize is getting somebody, a goaltender, so Mikey can play games?
Yes. Yes. He's one of your top prospects, and you're not putting him in a position to succeed. And when you do that, you're not doing any favors to him. I'll say again, go listen to the Vancast when Kevin Woodley was on. He talked about how Mikey DiPietro is doing the most with this situation. He is staying on ice as much as possible, trying to get the most out of this situation, but he needs games. Like, they just sent down Brogan Rafferty to Manitoba, and Arthur Silovs is sitting down there playing one game. And it's just, I wonder if they will find someone. I think they might be just waiting to see what's going on with Utica, because underreported story with Utica being in haven't played in over a week now because of some positive COVID tests with the Syracuse Crunch and Utica as well. So they're in limbo right now. So sending him down to the Comets doesn't necessarily help him that much right now. And But they need to find a way to get some games in for Mikey DiPietro if they want to be able to develop him into a NHL backup at the very least, after in a year or so when Holtby's contract is up.
Well, there went my idea, because I was going to say, why don't we just swap him for Gillies and get some games in? But there you
Why wasn't Alex Stalock an option?
When he went on waivers?
Yeah.
Let's see here. Who claimed him?
Edmonton. And I shout out to to our friends at the Oilers YYC podcast. Their theory is the Oilers are going to protect Stalock.
I think it's I was trying to see what his cap is, but he's on the IR right now. I think that's probably COVID quarantine issues though. But he's only making $785. I don't know why he wasn't an option, to be honest. I think that's just they aren't focused on that. For some reason, they don't seem to be focused on that part. So I think that's part and parcel. Like in that same group of players that got waived when the Canucks claimed Jamie Vesey was Anton Forsberg. And
But Ottawa claimed him.
Ottawa claimed him. But
yeah.
So I was really hoping that the Canucks would make a claim on Forsberg because of for this. Like he makes, I think, $700. So you don't have to have him on the taxi squad. You could have him on your main roster to carry 3 goalies, because the rule is you have to carry 3 goalies between your main roster and your taxi squad. So they need to find a way to bring someone in so that they can send Mikey DiPietro down to the AHL and get him some games. Like if they want him to be a potential backup in a year or so time, they need to find a way to do that.
And it's amazing because this has been an issue for the Canucks going back, a couple of seasons now, where their goaltending depth has become a problem. I mean, was it last year or the year before? I think it was last year that they had DiPietro up on an emergency basis, and they played San Jose, and he was a junior goalie at that time.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago.
2 years ago now. I know, it was just time's flying. But, so this, like, how have they not solved this yet? That's puzzling, very puzzling.
Well, this one's just, I think this one's just them not prioritizing it, and with the money being an issue with the Aquilinis and every not being able to bring in enough revenue to do much. I think that's part of the reason. That's one of the reasons why I don't think the Canucks are going to be looking at doing just buying for this year. I don't foresee that happening, because I don't see Aquilini opening up the wallet enough to do that properly and seeing like I want you and allowing draft pick future assets to go out the door for someone who likely won't come back.
Fair. Is there anything else on the Canucks that we need to talk about?
Good.
We are good. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? We will get to that. I want to, our next topic is, I'm just going to share this tweet from Thomas Drance, but it was inspired by a different tweet earlier this week. But Thomas Drance has brought this to our attention in his tweeting last couple of days. Finding it hard to think of a time in the last decade or so that Hockey Night in Canada, good grief. Finding it hard to think of a time in the last decade that Hockey Night in Canada broadcast has been as consistently enjoyable as it has been this season. There was also a tweet earlier this week about the idea that hot panels are an outdated idea and that they should not exist anymore. I want to say YYZ Sports Media tweeted that out.
Jonah Siegel,
Yeah. And that led us to having a conversation. We wanted to get into what we are thinking about Hockey Night in Canada, and we wanted to spend some time on that. Two of us have some media training here and feel that we can give a little bit of an input here, as well as Chris and Sean can give an input as well. But Chris, if I was to give you a grade, ask you to give a grade of Hockey Night in Canada, what grade would you give it and why?
I would probably like. I don't have any strong feelings towards it, but like if I was like forced to give a grade, I'd probably say like a solid B.
How do we force Chris to do something?
You just need to dangle some beers in front of him, and then
There you go.
Imagine there's a beer in front of you right now.
But no, I'm enjoying it, but like for me, I guess I don't have like a strong opinion on like that panels are outdated or they should go in this direction. Like I'm just enjoying the product that they're putting out there, and I don't feel the need for a change. So I'm just happy with the status quo.
Oh, yeah, let me ask you this question. Is it more entertaining this year with Kevin B? Do you find yourself more entertained with someone like Kevin BX on the panel?
Yeah, like you definitely need a guy that brings more life to it, like Juice definitely has. Like it definitely, and Sean said this 100 times probably by now, but like it felt stale before BX got brought on. Like it just felt robotic and monotonous, and like they just kind of like went through the same rigmarole every game after game. Whereas BX brings humor to it. He actually brings some extra insight that you might not have thought of. Mm-hmm. So like I very much have enjoyed Kevin being introduced to Hockey Night in Canada. I'm happy with him being part of it moving forward. But like beyond that, I guess I don't have strong opinions.
Okay, there's a beer in front of you next time. We'll get Sean.
It's still robotic in my opinion. I think they have their crutches. Kevin BX is doing an absolutely fantastic job knocking over those crutches and making them actually walk on their own, but they still have their crutches. They lack a willingness to tell certain stories. They rely on Kevin to bring life to that panel. They rely on the human interest stories that to say that's all the stories they tell. They don't tell many stories other than like this is someone who went through a lot and this is how they're them coming out the end and all that. It's the same stuff over and over again with this panel and Hockey Night in Canada right now, and it's great that BX is throwing wrenches into all the cogs and bringing out the personalities in these people. Like we're seeing Cassie Campbell throw barbs and jabs this way and that. Her calling out BX on forgetting that he was on the second power play unit in with the Canucks in 2011 was great. Yeah. That's fantastic. Like showing that personality is fantastic, but there's so much stuff that just seems forced. Seems like they're trying to tell certain stories but completely ignoring other things, and it's frustrating because there's so much stuff about hockey that needs to be, the stories need to be told, and it'll help grow the game.
Yeah. So for me, BX took what was pretty much unwatchable intermission segments and made them watchable again. So that's been a big plus. I think anytime we want to discuss whether a panel's good or not, there has to be great sort of chemistry and comfort and interaction between the panelists. That's what makes Inside the NBA on TNT so great, is that everything's just so natural and fun, and yet you're still learning something. And yet if they get into deep topics, they can tackle that too. It just works. That panel just works. I don't know, and you can't just try and copy that, but they're getting somewhere with Bieksa, and for me, I think what's been a big plus about his presence on the intermission shows is he's managed to keep Ron McLean's ego in check quite a bit. I think that's helped make for a better product. To Sean's point, Cassie's getting more comfortable. Kelly Rudy looks like he's having more fun, so the fun element has definitely improved, but ever since getting rid of Don Cherry, basically now they've just made one more intermission full of talking heads, and it just comes across a little bit lazy. Like I think Christine Simpson is an underutilized talent there right now with the types of features that she does. I'd like to see some more of that. There's other topics that they can get into. Sean suggested some of them offline to us about use of technology and doing more on sort of where the game's headed. There's other topics that they can get into. It does come across a bit lazy sometimes, just the way they trot out the panelists on, with the 4 boxes, and they just kind of yak about the game. Even though it's more watchable, I would not say there's any, appointment viewing there on Hockey Night in Canada like there used to be. I mean, even the headline segment, you've got a couple of people that work for the network that's presenting the games. It's not the same thing as the old hot stove back in the day when you had Al Strachan on there, not afraid to say anything or put any kind of a crazy rumor out there. The credibility of that segment and the friction between panelists sometimes over the intel that they're sharing made that appointment viewing. And, we don't have that anymore. Coach's Corner was appointment viewing. We don't have that anymore. So I'd like to see them employ some more creativity instead of just leaning hard on the panels all the time, even if the panel is, a little more fun to watch now.
Yeah, I think that they have put so much on the shoulders of Kevin Bieksa and Elliot Friedman to be the entertainment features of Hockey Night in Canada that everyone else is sort of, and I think that there have been times, like, yes, Cassie's starting to push in, but there have been times that some of them I don't think feel that they're contributing a lot. I'm not going to dispute Kevin Bieksa's entertainment. He said something last night that I disagreed with. That's completely fine. Cassie is fine. Elliot Friedman does his thing, but I just don't like. I wish there was more debate, or there's more like interaction between the 4 that would make it a little bit better. Or this year, what they've done a little bit differently is 2 are watching one game and 2 are watching another in the early game. I think that there's ways to fix that. They're trying to blend all of the intermissions all together.
Well, and again, that is that laziness. I mean, technically speaking, it'd be easier for them to produce the intermissions by doing it that way. But you're trying to serve 2 audiences at once and not really doing a good job with either. Yeah,
I think that they should. I don't think that the people that are watching the Montreal-Vancouver game really, if you're watching the Montreal-Vancouver game, if you want to watch the Calgary-Toronto game, you will turn and watch the Calgary-Toronto game. You don't need to have the same intermissions on at the same time. Just split them up. That would be my opinion. I think the other thing as well is, and I may get some heat for this, but I may also get some cheers for this. They are not using Tara Sloan properly. First of all, that is another person that they have not utilized. I totally think she should be on Hockey Night in Canada. I think that she's got an incredible presence. I think she is a storyteller that can tell some of these stories outside of normal hockey that are still hockey stories that she can bring out. And I think that leads me to believing that I think Ron MacLean I think it's time for Ron to step aside. I think this is just my opinion. I think he continues to feel guilty about what happened with Don Cherry, and that's fine. And I think he's trying to make up for it. But I think at times he's overshadowed David Amber, who I think is very strong, and I think that they also need to be using more. But I that's one thing that I think that there's enough talent that they're not using that I think needs to be used more. And I don't think that they need to be using the crutches that they're using. They have enough entertainment throughout that panel and throughout Sportsnet that they can just be using a lot more. And telling more local stories instead of just the perception of them focusing only on one certain team. And I think that they're trying to change that. I honestly think that this year they've tried to change that a little bit more, but I still think that there's that going to be that feeling that Toronto's going to be number 1 all the time.
But before we get into some of that other stuff, I disagree with you on Tara Sloan. I think they are using her correctly in that hometown hockey segment and doing that. I think she's kind of in limbo right now until that show can hit the road again. Once that show can hit the road again, that's when you're going to see her shine even brighter. I really like her in that role. I think she's a fantastic person to do that You could have her telling those great human interest stories. Like, I love them. I just think there's too much of them, and they don't show. There's other stories that they need to be telling about. They need to be telling. And between her and Christine Simpson, you've got two superstar like quality interviewers and storytellers in what they do in different ways. Yeah. There are other people that I think you need to bring on as hosts and stuff on the panel. Carolyn Cameron for one, Jeff Merrick. They are criminally underusing Jeff Merrick, in my opinion. He is someone that can hit all the demographics in terms of being able to relate to them, and is someone and is someone who has fun, understands the fun of hockey. And I think that's something that we've lost, and it's something that I've been battling with for this whole season. Honestly, am I being too hypercritical? Am I being that of not only hockey but hockey fans, the media, and all that? Like, I think it's just because I miss being able to go and immerse myself in the majesty of live hockey. I remember when the Canucks lowered their banners, and I saw those banners, and it triggered me, because I was thinking of all the little things that you miss when you go to an NHL game or go watch live hockey. The sights, the sounds, the smells, just the whole ambiance. Mm-hmm. I think everyone's just stuck watching games on TV, and we've gone super hypercritical. We need to be able to tell the stories and bring that ambiance as much as possible to the viewer. And if you can do that and bring the fun back, and that's where I think people like Carolyn Cameron and Jeff Merrick can do that. People like Bieksa do that. Even Anthony Stewart, who his jokes are cringe most of the time, but he's trying to be fun. He's trying to bring the fun back. And we need that. We need more of that. We need to be able to stop hyper analyzing what's happening on the game and tell stories again. Show what else is going on in the hockey world. Because hockey isn't just NHL. We're so hyper-focused on the NHL, but hockey isn't just the NHL. You've got NWHL, you've got the CHL, you've got NCAA, and all the stars from those leagues need to be shown. Like, you can't tell me that there's not an audience for updates on the NCAA and NWHL and CHL, especially with the NCAA and CHL, because you're going to have prospects from these teams that are the future. You're selling the future of the sport. Mm-hmm. There's so many other things to do, and there's so many people who are passionate about it. They need to bring on people like Peter Labardius on to talk junior hockey. That guy's like attitude and emotion and positivity towards junior hockey a lot. Labardius and Sam Constantino, they're infectious. You get excited when you listen to them talk about the prospects and the WHL, the OHL, the QMJHL. I want to see more of that. I want to see people who have infectious attitudes that are spreading the fun, the positivity, and telling stories about that to help make it so that people do want to continue to watch hockey, do want to continue to engage, do want to play, like learn how to play. One thing I would love to see them to get into, there is so many content creators out there who are helping are documenting their love of hockey, their beginning of them learning how to play hockey, whether it's learning how to skate and then all that and as well as, or learning how to be a goaltender or stuff like that. There's so much more out there to tell the sport, to sell the sport. It's not just NHL.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I remember seeing correctly, they had some very brief highlights from the NCAA Women's Frozen Four, I think, on the broadcast last night. So, they're kind of dipping their toes into that. But yeah, like, don't be afraid to do some more, right? Like, you don't want it to look token, right? Like if they just show some scores from women's hockey, that to me looks token. But if you really get into it and promote it, then you're helping your own product. You're growing overall interest in hockey and growing the game, and maybe pulling in some more viewers that are not hardcore into the NHL or into a particular team. But they're curious about hockey and that might pique their interest a little bit.
And with how many international hockey players are in the league now, like you could almost make an argument to include some of the European leagues in that included coverage as well.
Could you imagine going back a couple years before PD came into the league and they were covering that and showing highlights? He'd be a bigger star now. That's part of it too. Is you start selling these kids before they even get here, and when they come in, you're already rocketing them to superstardom. There's always the one thing that always gets debated about is whether or not the NHL sells their players enough. You know what's a big part of that? The broadcasting partners actually selling the players. The broadcasting partners selling them as stars. We go back to when Crosby first was coming up. There was lots of stuff about Crosby. He was a star before he even stepped on the ice.
Yeah.
McDavid the same, and they deserve it. But there's other players who didn't get it. I would say even Austin Matthews didn't get that treatment.
I think NBC South of the Border does maybe a little bit of a better job of focusing in on the stars, even on the Canadian teams. You know, they do show the odd game here and there with Canadian teams involved. But then that just brings on new skepticism, right? Like, I mean, if NBC's schedule is full of Penguins games and Capitals games just because of the two players, then that even though they're promoting the stars there, they're kind of ignoring other teams, and that rankles fans. So it's a bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. I just wanted to comment outside of the studio programming, though. I mean, certainly the addition of Chris Cuthbert at Hockey Night in Canada has really deepened the roster considerably, and has done a huge for their midweek regional Leafs package. I mean, prior to this season, it was pretty clear of PSN and Sportsnet showing the midweek Leaf games which one of the two was a better hockey presentation. Whereas now they've got Chris and they've got Greg Simpson, their top color guy, doing the Leafs game. Over on TSN, you've got Gord Miller and Ray Ferraro. I mean, Leaf fans are spoiled. You're getting some good broadcasting there now. Whereas before, the Sportsnet regional Leafs package was, with all due respect to John Bartlett and Greg Millen, and prior to John, Paul Romanek, there was a considerable drop off in quality between what TSN was doing with the Leafs and what Sportsnet was doing with the Leafs. So that's been good. Harnarayan Singh, listen to him do the Oilers Jets game last night. I mean, he's coming along. He's definitely coming along. I don't see him being in a top 3 or 4 role in terms of Hockey Night in Canada play-by-play going forward, but he's been more than serviceable, and obviously taking on a bigger schedule this year with Jim Houston electing not to travel. Although with vaccination schedule and where Jim falls in the age brackets, I imagine he by the end of the regular season will probably be doing games outside of Vancouver again in time for the playoffs. So that's been good. I know people have their opinions about color commentators, but I mean, any sport, any commentator, everybody hears what they want to hear about that. I think we just sort of have to kind of ignore that part of it.
They're all homers.
Yeah, Rick Ball is underutilized. I'd love to see him do more non-Flames games. There was a Canucks Jets game that he did earlier in the season on a Saturday night, and what a treat that was listening to him. So I'd love to see Rick Ball on more. John Bartlett, it was kind of odd hearing him call a couple of games. I can't remember an occasion in the past where he's done a national game involving the Canucks, so that was different on people's ears. Calls a good game. Voice is something we're not used to hearing, but I think he's decent. Yeah, Gary Galley, I don't know. He's okay. He's okay.
I liked Gary Galley more than I liked John Bartlett last night.
I don't know where I put Gary Galley versus Louis DeBrusque in terms of color analyst hierarchy, but he's pretty straight up about what he thinks.
with the color analysts, it's so tough in hockey because you can go 2, 3, 4 minutes without speaking a word, and you can't you have to worry. You have to make sure you're not stepping on the play-by-play announcer's toes either. And that's something that I think when Cassie does color, I think that's when she gets in trouble, in my opinion. She starts talking, and next thing you know, we're like 2 minutes into a play, and she's still talking. Like it less is more with the color commentators as well. And it's so hard to appease, especially this season when you have it's all Canadian. Like, so you've got for national games, you're very rarely are you, especially for the West teams, very rarely are you getting Cuthbert and Simpson, who you're kind of used to being the people who are doing the big national games. You're almost getting local like regional games commentators a lot of the time. So it's tough at times. As we said, having John Bartlett do the game last night was something that we wouldn't see in a regular setting. Even if Houston was traveling, it would have been probably Cuthbert calling the Flames Leafs game. You'd have Houston calling Vancouver Montreal, and then you'd have Harner Ryan calling the Oilers Jets game. And that would have been amazing. That would have been basic. I would say right now their top 3 national play-by-play options. You still have Rick Ball as an option. You still have John Shorthouse who is an option. Both of them have gotten national assignments more than once because they call a good game. But it's tough right now. It's definitely tough to appease both markets when you're showing a national game, because it's all Canada now.
Yeah, people need to remember they don't actually care who wins or loses, right? So you but it needs to calm down on that. In terms of color commentators talking, I mean, Louis DeBrusque is one that seems to think he's paid by the word. I mean, I like Louis. He doesn't annoy me, but less would be more with him as well. And I know people don't care for John Garrett, outside Vancouver or even within the Vancouver sports market. One thing that he does well is let the game breathe. He's breathless with his commentary. He tends not to say too much during the day, and then when he has something to say, he's pretty concise about it.
John Garrett's someone who's a little bit different from a lot of the other color commentators. All the other ones seem to have more analysis. Well, John understands it's a little more entertainment, and he tries to entertain the viewer more than inform them.
Yeah,
with all of his stories about ketchup.
It's not if, it's when a food reference will work its way into the telecast.
I mean, the best one is Ray Ferraro, in my opinion. He's the one that can both entertain and analyze at the same time. I think he's by far and away the best one in Canada.
He's the gold standard for sure.
He is, yes. The wet bed, what a mess, all that. And in terms of I get frustrated. I understand it. I get frustrated with Homer play-by-playism too, but I think this year you have to, Oiler fans are upset with Cassie Campbell Pascal. My God, have you heard Jack Michaels? He's just as big of a homer for the Oilers as Cassie Campbell is. And,
yeah, but on that, I mean, if he was given a Hockey Night in Canada broadcast to do involving the Oilers, I imagine it would be done quite professionally. I don't think that we need to get hung up on that.
Yeah, and you know what? Even if he is for me, here's the way that I look at it. Having that representation, which I think is something that I think ultimately something I would like to see Hockey United in Canada overall improve as part of their package. It's good for the nation, for all of us to say, hey, this is what's going on with the Oilers, right? We don't hear, we're always it's always good to hear. I don't think we hear enough from the people that are deep inside the team and the organization enough outside. A person that I think they could use more as an example would be a guy like Sat Shaw for Canuck games. Just put him on for a couple minutes. Here's what's going on with the Canucks from Sat. I mean, you've hired him anyway. A guy like Pat Steinberg as an example for the Flames, or Bob Stauffer for the Oilers, or people like that you can use from each organization that you're watching, and you can say, hey, this is what's going on. What's going on in Winnipeg? I don't know. I don't think that there's enough in-depth analysis on Hockey Night in Canada. It feels to me like the priority is generally Toronto, and then everybody else, it is for everybody else.
One thing I noticed on Friday night, because we had the Friday and Saturday when both the Leafs versus Flames and Habs versus Canucks were both starting at 5:00 Mountain, 7:00 Eastern. Is that there was no Toronto panel on the Vancouver feed for that Friday game. They had their Sportsnet Central.
That's right. Yeah, they had the update
showing highlights, and then they went to Murph and Sat. It was Murph and Harmon Dial. Like it was. And I was like, you know what? I actually like that. It doesn't feel forced that Toronto has to. The people in Toronto are watching Vancouver games and having to talk about Vancouver when they haven't really paid attention to what's actually happening with Vancouver, because they aren't paying attention day to day.
Yeah. And another thing too, I wanted I think more local, more regional in a bigger picture, I think would help. We'll get to the Flames part in a second. Another thing, like this is as an example of something that is being criminally missed, is the story of Connor Bedard. That it should be a national hockey story. This is a guy that is 15 years old. He's given exemptional player status. He's on the level of other ones that were given it. This guy, there is a lot of talk about when this guy is going to be a number one pick. This is a story that Hockey Night in Canada should be watching and sharing what's going on with Connor Bedard. That's a missed story and a missed opportunity to me. They don't, and I'll say this: Sportsnet does not talk about the WHL enough. And I know that we're four people sitting in the West, but there's not enough coverage on the WHL. We'll go back to what happened with the Vancouver Giants and how people had to illegally stream a WHL championship game to watch it. To me, that's the kind of stuff that I think is just completely missing in a lot of ways. Just some of those there's some really interesting stories that are outside of that Ontario province that are not being told. But
well, as I said, going back to what I said earlier about the basically making Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid absolute superstars before they even stepped on an NHL ice. That's something that they need to be working on. If they've got time to fix that with Connor Bedard, I think maybe next year I hope to see them do that, because this is his first year playing WHL. He's played all of 9 games, I think. So there's still lots of time for them to give him the time and press that he looks like he's deserving. Sorry, no, he's got. Let's see here. Crap. Sorry about that. He's played 5 games. He's only played 5 games so far. So I think that's part of it, is that all these junior leagues are just starting up again. But I really, really hope that they give him the same treatment that they've given players like Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid, because Lafreniere as well, because he deserves it. I think I said they've got the time to give him all the press that he potentially could deserve, and we'll see what happens. But I agree with Kevin in terms of the way they have treated it in the past. It gives me skepticism that they will.
Yeah, and I think too. I think that this is part of the friction with Hockey Night in Canada. I don't know what the ratings are right now, but I think that we are seeing some changes happening, and I think it's a good thing. But I still think that one of the battle that Hockey Night in Canada is always going to have it. Even on Twitter a little bit last night, the Scott Rinchel got at it with someone there as well, complaining what channel the Canucks game was on. It was not on Sportsnet Pacific. The Leaf game was. And just sort of that perception that Hockey Night in Canada is priority one is Toronto. I think that they're always going to be battling that. I think that there are going to be fans that always are going to perceive that anyway, no matter what they do. But at the same time, I do think that there's some things that they need to change on that. In terms of play-by-play, by the way, totally think they missed Dave Randorf. I understand why that happened. But I'm glad Dave Randorf is on Tampa Bay broadcast. But he is missed certainly as one of the Hockey Night in Canada play-by-play guys for sure. And in terms of the Flames, we had this poll question up, and it didn't get a lot of traction. But I think one of the things that Sportsnet West needs to do is find other writers other than Eric Francis to join that panel. I know that Eric Francis is the guy that everybody either loves watching or hate watches, but I think it's time to get some other perspectives in there. I'd like to see a Haley Salvan or a Darren Haynes or other people just join that panel other than Eric Francis. I think it would do good for the Flames community. I think it would do good for the Flames branding as well. I think it would do very well to change that up and have less Eric Francis.
Yeah, like with the Canucks broadcasts, even though they're all Sportsnet people, there's some good variety there between Ian McIntyre, Sat Shaw, Scott Rintoul, Dan Riccio. I mean, they're all very well-spoken, intelligent, informed voices that are in the employ already that add something to the intermission panel from a local perspective, and that is lacking a little bit with the Flames telecasts. But last time I saw their panel, I mean, they had Ryan Leslie with Brendan Morrison and Matt Stajan, and I thought that was a pretty good panel. I
really do like Brendan Morrison. I like BMO a lot.
Yeah, Stajan's really loosened up quite a bit since he started.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's just what I like about what Sportsnet Pacific is doing with the Canucks is you're getting a variety of different voices. And I think that's what you need in with West and Calgary. Like, basically all they have is Eric Francis and ex-players. Yeah. They have some good talents on their Sportsnet radio that they should be using. Let alone the beat writers as well. If you're worried about how they look and how they come off on camera, then get people who have the training. Get the Steinbergs, get the Pinders, I talked about them earlier. Get the Lubardiuses. Lubardius is the color guy for games anyways. He's there.
Yeah, you just got to slide him over into the TV booth to do the segment, and that's it.
Yeah.
So it's just I feel like it's a missed opportunity right now for the Flames and Sportsnet West to not have the people who are, especially the radio guys. As much as I love the beat writers and all that, the radio guys currently have especially Steinberg. They've got the pulse of the fan base.
Yeah.
Does Eric Francis have the pulse of the fan base? No. He's got the pulse of the higher ups in the Flames management, but he doesn't have the pulse of the fan base.
No, Stat Steinberg definitely has the pulse of the fan base. I will totally agree with you on that for sure.
And I think that's why Sat works really well, because he's got the pulse of the fan base, because he does the post game radio shows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you bring in Steinberg, I think you'd have a lot more happy people and a lot more people continuing to watch through the intermissions. You don't have them on all the time. Sat's not on all the time for the Canucks. I'd like to see the Canucks use more Jannik Hansen. Personally, I want to see some more. I want to see just a little bit more. Get some more ex players, because there's value to that. You need that the wider the net you cast of who you bring on to talk about it and bring in different perspectives, the better. And that's kind of where I'm at with the Flames coverage on Sportsnet West right now. Is it's just ex players and Eric Francis. Bring in more.
With the Canucks, though, we tend to hire our ex-players like Chris Higgins and Ryan Johnson and all those. So they're already in the organization. But yes, I get your point.
They had Jannik on a couple times.
Yeah, they have had Jannik on a couple times. But Chris, you are right. The Canucks have hired them for different
Manny
roles
before he left.
Yeah,
or they've been hired by other teams.
Yeah,
I know 650's had they've got Jovo on. I don't know where he's based out of. He's probably based out of Florida.
Yeah, he's in Florida.
Yeah, but there's options there. There's options there.
Even the Oilers, they do have Bob Stauffer on, but I wouldn't mind hearing it Reed Wilkins every once in a while. That's probably another guy that has the pulse of the fan base up there too.
And I think that's part of the issue with the national broadcasts. Is it doesn't feel like they have a pulse on what's going on with these teams, especially when it's not Toronto.
Yeah, for sure. And I think finding ways, and finding ways for more Winnipeg broadcasts, I think has to be a priority in some way. They have to fix that. And in a proper time.
The two teams they don't have the rights to. I mean, they're clearly second-class citizens on their coverage, and it's shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, I agree for sure.
Well, I'm looking forward to the Ottawa versus Calgary game that starts at 3 p.m. local here.
Yeah, 2 p.m. my time. That's exciting. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else on this that we need to dig into?
I just want to go back very quickly on the Canucks game not being on Sportsnet Pacific last night. I had a friend of mine bring this up as well, and that all came about because of the fact that the Vancouver-Montreal game was the CBC game. So, which in itself is odd. Why is the Leafs game not the CBC game? So, so if you're somebody that only has the CBC and the Sportsnet regional channels, well, if you're in BC and you have the Canucks game on Sportsnet Pacific and on CBC, and you don't have any of the other Sportsnet channels, you're shut out of the Flames Leafs game. You can't see it. So that's why they did that. But yeah, it creates a confusing situation. I mean, even for myself, I mean, I'm up on this all the time, but I turn on the TV, I put on Sportsnet Pacific like I'm used to, and there's the pregame for the Leafs Flames game. I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm not, pressing the remote trying to find the Canuck game, and so I Sportsnet's trying to achieve a few things. They have put couple of Leaf games off of the CBC on Saturday nights to try, I'm assuming, drive subscriptions to Sportsnet and then Sportsnet Now and all that. But the inconsistencies there then create fan confusion and frustration over how to find the games, and they've struggled with that right since the very beginning of this rights deal.
Yeah. Let's be honest though, if the games were swapped and the Toronto game was on CBC and the Vancouver Habs game was on all Sportsnet the Sportsnet regional channels, there'd be someone complaining about that too. Like, it's just there's no win in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than the old days when CBC had everything exclusively and they showed it regionally. So it is better, but yeah, when there's going to be people struggling to find the games, and Sportsnet needs to continue to try and do a better job of helping people find those games.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I mean, I don't have cable. I do all mine streaming, so whatever I want to watch, I watch, and we'll maybe touch on that a little bit later on here quickly in the end here with some other media news. Or do we want to touch on some other media news now, or do we want to get into just quickly wanted to bring up Sakaris and Price are back. Podcast only at this particular point. And Rick Dollywall, who private messaged and corrected me when I asked about 2021, and his tweet he's technically right about his Brock Besser tweet. He's back with Don Taylor on check. That will start on April the 5th. I think that's all four of those were completely missed. I think it's great to have them back.
I just hope that the check app is released in time for me so I can watch it, because being out of market won't have access to that unless that app is up and going.
So both of those are coming. Winnipeg's got their sports talk radio that started as well. And just quickly, I wanted to touch on this. Amazon has the exclusive rights of Thursday Night Football for NFL. Do anyone here see that being something potentially that the NHL may look at in the future? Exclusive streaming only service?
Yes.
I think you'd be smart to.
You look at the NFL is not the first league to go that way. The English Premier League, EPL, they're all on DAZN. That's I don't think they're going to go exclusive for all games, but I could definitely see NHL going the way the NFL is going, and maybe have a night that is all streaming.
Yeah, Major League Baseball's dabbled in this as well with Facebook and YouTube, where even Blue Jays games not available on Sportsnet when they were exclusively streamed on those platforms. So, I think it's still a very long time frame before it becomes a mainstream idea, but I could definitely see the NHL dipping its toes into that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that will be something interesting going forward. We'll kind of touch on Devin and I will do kind of a deep dive on the Flames a little bit later. But I wanted to play this for Darryl Sutter.
It's always a good time when we hear from Uncle Darryl.
I find Darryl Sutter press conferences amazing. I am a big fan of Darryl Sutter press conferences. Let me play this on full screen, and damn it, sorry about that. Here we go. I'm just going to play this a little bit here.
Games against Matthews. I think he plays such a sound game, and then within the
that's about Chris Tanev, but I'll keep this going here.
He can play. He's comfortable playing against those top guys like that, and even look at the goal that they scored tonight. He does. Put it this way, with Chris, he's just you can count on him all the time, and it doesn't matter what type of game it is, you can count on him.
And just moving your forward lines around in the second and third period, it's pretty obvious you're just trying to spark some sort of change offensively. Not really offensively. The first we had really good pace. Quite honestly, we had a better first period tonight than we did last night, but they switched their lines around. We had some guys that couldn't handle the size of Toronto up front.
To me, I was saying this to Sean off air. We'll cut that off. I was saying this to Sean off air. I think a Darryl Sutter, one of the things that I just feel like with the Darryl Sutter press conferences, it's more and more sounding like a bit of an indictment of the way that Brad Treliving has built this team. Darryl Sutter earlier this week said that they don't have the skill to like everyone else. Treliving tried to develop skill. Again, this is about size. We don't match, and it just seems to me that Darryl Sutter isn't necessarily a fan of what Brad Treliving has built with the Calgary Flames. Whether you agree or disagree with that or not, that's Darryl Sutter's perception.
Yeah, what I responded to Kevin when we discussed this off air was that I think part of this is resetting fan expectations as well, because I think there was a lot of fans out there who thought that the Flames had the skill on this team. I think it's this year has proven not, and I think Darryl's just trying to reset expectations that way. But Kevin's not fully out to lunch with that take that he's probably not fully enamored with how this team is built. There is a lot of grit on this Flames team, but there's a lot of smaller grit too. So yeah, they've got Lucic. Yeah, they've got Brett Ritchie. Now there's a reason Brett Ritchie is on that top line. Is because he is a big physical player who is going to play Darryl Sutter hockey. But they're out. You've got Kachuk who's big and physical. But outside of that, a lot of their grit comes from smaller players. So if they're come up against a gritty, bigger team, they're going to struggle. So I think that's where that comment came from.
Would it be fair to draw parallels in between the fact that Sutter's not afraid to stir up some shit with the organization in the same sense that what Tortorella did with the Canucks core in 2013 or 2014, whenever that was?
The core is stale.
Yeah.
This team is stale. I think there's
so
definitely
old school, entrenched in just hockey culture and have mass respect by fans and whatnot that he's not afraid to say something that most others would
I think
be
you're
afraid
bang
to.
on, Chris. I think you're bang on with that comparison.
I just put it quite simply. I mean, Darryl Sutter's of the age where he's a just say it type. Like I wouldn't read too much into, whether he's aiming his message at management or what have you. He's just keeping it real. He's of that sort now where, if they fire him, he doesn't really care. And I think that's where John Tortorella too with the Canucks. I mean, he had a contract. He was guaranteed a certain amount. He was going to do things his way and be himself. And if they wanted to show him the door, he wasn't going to lose sleep over it. So, it's refreshing because I think you get better answers out of a press conference there than you would otherwise.
The only thing that I will counter with is I don't think that Darryl Sutter is afraid of being fired because I don't think he's going to be fired. I think I may be as bold to say that I think he's got more power in this organization than Brad Treliving. I think if it comes down to one of the two that have to go, I think Tree goes before Sutter. And I think that there is a small chance that the replacement could be Darryl Sutter, or he will have a say in who that GM is.
Whoa, yeah, okay. Well, I don't see Darryl wanting to be in management. I think he's comfortable, as a coach. But, pointed out on this podcast before, I believe by yourself, Kevin. I mean, Brad Treliving's been the general manager of the Flames as long as Jim Benning's been the general manager of the Canucks, and they both have the same number of playoff series wins. So now Treliving's not seemingly under as much fire in market as Jim Benning, but clearly at this juncture, Darryl Sutter is in a more secure situation with the Flames than Brad Treliving.
Yeah, it's Sutter's stature in the hockey culture, combined with the fact that they've gone through as many coaches as they have in the past half decade, that I think he's going to be given a much longer leash than Tree if it ever comes to any sort of shakeup.
Let's ask this question: is Brad Treliving fired if the Flames miss the playoffs this year?
It's possible. I'm not going to say it will happen, but I would say it's a definite possibility.
If this was a full season without current pandemic, I would say I would have a higher percentage saying yes, but I think they give him one more year.
Yeah, that's kind of the doubt that was lingering in my mind. Kevin just basically vocalized it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't see it. I think the ownership is happy for the most part with what Treliving has done, even though the results aren't there. I think he gets one more after this if they don't make the playoffs, or at least half a season and see what happens.
It gets to carry the team into next season, though.
Yeah.
There is some names though that if Darryl Sutter's coaching, that I could see being a GM here in Calgary. There's out there that I think could work, but and I mean, Tree has a very even interesting trade deadline because I think one of the questions is whether they buy or sell. We didn't really talk about that. Do they buy or do they sell? I don't know. That's an interesting question. They've got a big question on what to do with Giordano, because really, that may be a situation. And I said this before. The right thing to do would be to trade him before you don't protect him with Seattle, and give him that chance at getting that Stanley Cup. Because if you're not making the playoffs, how much? I mean, the only reason Giordano is playing is to get a cup. And I don't see him super excited about being unprotected going to Seattle at 37 years old.
Yeah, but he's got a modified no trade clause. He doesn't have the choice on that matter, right? If he wants out, he wants out, but I don't foresee it. I think Giordano seems to be like the guy who wants to retire a Flame as well. Just like Alex Edler. I know that there's going to be a lot of Canucks fans clamoring for Benning to ask and to see if Edler will waive. I don't see it happening, and I don't see it happening with Giordano.
Essentially, it's almost a politely ask them to please retire. Either that, and especially with the Gio situation, if he doesn't retire or get traded, do you strip the C off of him to allow that culture change moving forward? It's interesting to see how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And Giordano's not even the only issue out there for Treliving going into this trade deadline and into this offseason. Since Darryl Sutter's taken over, Johnny and Monty have been not good. I know Devin will probably come in and yell at me for this one, but when you look at the stats on paper are not good for them. They are. What's interesting is that when you look at as per natural stat trick, the offensive zone start percentage, for that line, Richie, Monahan, and Gaudreau, Richie's got the highest offensive zone start percentage at 40.9% of the time starting in the offensive zone. Monahan and Gaudreau are at 38.1%. And I don't know if that's Darryl saying, look, you guys have to be better defensively before I put you in in positions to succeed offensively, or what? Because since Darryl's taken over in the 6 games, Gaudreau has not been on for a 5-on-5 goal for. He's been on for 3 against, and Monahan and Richie have been on for 1 goal for and 4 against. Like, that line is not up to snuff under Darryl Sutter.
But the problem,
what they do going forwards with that needs to be answered.
But the problem is you can't. I mean, you could split them, but who do you play Gaudreau with? Like, he's not going to. He doesn't work with Derek Ryan. He doesn't really work with Michael Backlund. He may work with Elias Lindholm, but does Monahan work with Tkachuk? That's the big problem, is how you juggle those lines. I mean, you could bring the Backlund, Tkachuk, and Mangiapane back together, but who are you playing Lucic with? You playing him with Lindholm, or are you playing with Monahan? That doesn't seem right.
For comparison's sake, that Tkachuk line, Lindholm, Tkachuk, and Dubé, they've been on for 5 goals for a 5-on-5, and Dubé's been on for 1 against, and Tkachuk and Lindholm for 2, and they're getting within that 55% O-zone start, just north of 55% offensive zone starts as per natural stat trick. So, like, they're making the most of their opportunities. They've been the best line under Darryl Sutter. I wouldn't break that line up. What I'm talking about is that this is a Treliving. This is a GM level decision here. What is going on with Monahan and Gaudreau? Why are they? You have to talk with Darryl Sutter and go, why are you starting them in the defensive, not in the offensive zone so much? Why are they not producing? What is going on there? And they have to make a decision on that and go figure out what the core looks like going forwards. I think that's one of the biggest reasons Darryl Sutter was hired in, is to find this new core, to figure out what this team looks like going forwards. So in terms of buying and selling, they're in the very similar situation to the Canucks, in my opinion. You have to look a year ahead. You have to look 2 years ahead with what moves you make. You cannot take in a rental here and just hope and pray that you can find a way to get in.
Mm-hmm. Do you think these are kind of sink or swim sort of little tests that Sutter are doing with, like, that top line?
Oh, definitely.
They're not the top line. It's the Lindholm line.
Oh, okay.
Dan's
not the top line, but the big name line.
Yes, this is definitely a sink or swim. Find out what you have in Monahan and Gaudreau situation with Darryl Sutter. And I think that's part of why I'm saying that this is now going to be a GM decision more than anything, more than a coaching decision in terms of what's going to happen at the deadline with those two. I don't think there's anything happening at the deadline, but I think this summer and this offseason, I don't think they're coming back with both those players next year. I think at least one's going to get traded.
Yeah.
I think I think you have to. I mean, they've done enough tweaking on in other areas and peripheral moves, and they're still kind of just spinning the tires still.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if both of them are back as well.
Yeah, I would too. And you've got Matthew Phillips coming up, playing well. He's a guy that I think will make a run for the roster next year. I think that Derek Ryan has proved himself to be very valuable. Michael Backlund's an interesting case, but I think Sutter loves him. I don't know where you get the score. Well, you're not getting scoring from Johnny, but where do you get that skill? That's the question. Or do you need that skill? That's the big question.
Well, that again, Backlund and Ryan are in their 30s, so and Backlund and Ryan Scott is a UFA after this year as well. So it's those guys aren't the players you're gonna want to be building around. Like they're building around Tkachuk, they're building around Lindholm. Those are the two they're building around, and then you have to find more skill. So whatever move is made, whether it's Monahan or Gaudreau, you have to get skill back. That cannot be a sell-off for draft picks move under this, because I just don't see that A, flying with the fan base, and B, being part of why you brought Darryl Sutter in. You brought Darryl Sutter in to take this team to the next level. Mm-hmm. So whatever move is made with one of those two big names, Monahan and Gaudreau, will have to be a quote unquote hockey trade as opposed to just selling off for future assets.
Yeah. One guy out there that was mentioned last night in headlines that I think the Flames should have a look at is Connor Garland, $775,000. He is a restricted free agent. Same point amount as Sam Reinhart that makes $5 million that has been on the block. That's a guy that I would think that the Flames should have a good look at. I know that they were in on Raquel, but apparently the price was too high. There's some other guys in the offseason that I think the Flames should take a look at, depending on price. But they're going to have
Taylor Hall.
No, sorry. We'll leave him for Graham and the Edmonton Oilers. You can have Taylor Hall, and yeah. But it solves that right shot with that right shot side dilemma. That's Connor Garland certainly would solve that problem. And I think if Connor Garland was in any other place other than Arizona, a lot of people would be talking about Connor Garland. He's criminally underrated there. So. Within the North, is there anything else that we want to kind of talk about?
Well, I know Parallax Prophecy has been just ranting in comments about the Jets. I wouldn't be surprised to see them fall back a little bit here. When I looked at in lead up to our discussion with Harrison from the Locked On Winnipeg Jets podcast, I looked at their numbers. And they're all over the place. So I really don't know what to expect from them. They're not numbers that look like a top team. So I wouldn't be surprised if they fall off. And so earlier, Kev, when you said that the Canucks could go as high as third, I think that's like a complete perfect scenario for the Canucks. But Winnipeg's definitely vulnerable here. I think they need to. They'd be a wild. They're going to be a wild card going into this trade deadline as well, because they definitely need to shore up that defense. I don't think Jordy Ben is someone that they would go after. I think they're going to look a lot higher up in that depth to fill a role higher up in that depth chart. Someone to be in their top four. That's not a Jordy Ben spot. So like that, Matthias Ekholm is, I think, one player that I think will be someone that they look at seriously. And they've already gone through this through the quarantine issue with Pierre-Luc Dubois. So it'll be watch for the Winnipeg Jets. I think they're going to be a team that could be they could push for the division and take that division lead, or they could be falling off. And depending on what they do in the next week to 2 weeks will really depend on what will really inform how they go at this deadline.
Yeah,
I think it was Rob Fay's post-game show, but he actually was talking about the potential of maybe Hamonic going back to his home province of Manitoba.
Is he a top four though?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what he was talking about, like with like the Jamie Benn type position. Like he's no higher up than Jamie Benn is. So like if they're not looking for a fifth or sixth guy, then they're not likely to. But I thought it was an interesting name to throw out there.
I think they need a legitimate top 2 defenseman, like starting like I mean Pionk and Morrissey are fine, but even when we heard from Harrison, it's that defense is certainly a question in Winnipeg there as well.
Would you like Tyler Myers back?
Yeah, that's probably going to be a big no from there.
Yeah. But the other, just quickly, the Leafs goaltending situation is quite fascinating right now, isn't it?
Yes,
You've got one guy that is going to be a unrestricted free agent that's struggling, and your backup, who backups always get sort of that fan favorite love. He hasn't allowed by the way, get ready to say nice. He hasn't allowed a goal in 69 shots. Go ahead,
nice.
Go ahead. There we go. But that's a really fascinating situation going on there.
I think you ride Jack Campbell and see what you have with him. I don't think you know what you have there. Like, yeah, he's done that over that long a period, but he's been injured. He gets a shutout, gets injured. He gets a shutout, doesn't play for a while. Like, I think it's time for them to ride him and see what they have, and see if they have someone that can replace Freddie Anderson going into next season. Because I don't know, I think Freddie I think Freddie's coming down to earth. I think he's going to be. I think he's been getting the Cam Talbot treatment, having a little bit longer of a runway in terms of the top end of his play, but he's fallen off now, like, just because of the absolute amount of shots he's faced over the past few years. He's worn down. I think he's someone that I think will toil away for a little bit afterwards, wherever he ends up after this season, and then we'll come back after a year or two of not having to face as many shots as he has with this Toronto team.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I know Hot Take Hockey is like, the problem is more than Freddie Anderson.
Oh, it is.
And I would agree with that. But they're in a very interesting position in the trade deadline as well. And they and in the off season, they have a very interesting trade deadline off season that they need to think about as well, in terms of they probably do need a defenseman, and they probably do need a tweak in forward depending on how everybody is going. But another fascinating question is Zach Hyman, unrestricted free agent, a guy that probably a lot of teams are going to go after and overpay, but a guy that I think the Leafs really would value too. That is an interesting question next year for them as well.
Oh, I don't see Hyman hitting hitting UFA. I think they're locking him up long term. He is someone who I think is he's one of those like good glue guys that like does everything well on and off the ice, and getting rid of him would be the wrong decision for the Leafs.
Yeah, but I would think you're gonna have a ceiling that you're gonna pay for him, though. That's it. I don't know if that's as simple as that. I could see it. If you're a Leaf fan, I hope so. But
especially with Toronto's cap gymnastics.
Yeah.
The thing with the Leafs is they've still got. Let's see, they don't have too much coming off the cap, but they do have younger players coming up who could be able to push up into the lineup to help them with that. I disagree with you, Kev. I don't think they're looking for a blue liner. Maybe they should, but I don't think they will be in this deadline. I think they're going to be looking to add some depth up front. I think they traded away they traded away a blue liner just like a week or so ago. They traded away Mikko Lehtinen. They traded away that blue line depth. So I think they've got Rasmus Sandin, they've got Timmy Liljegren, they've got Travis Dermott. All three of those are players, younger players that need to play. So I think they aren't going to be bringing in another veteran defenseman to put those players farther down the lineup. So I think it is going to be a forward that they bring in at the deadline.
Yeah, I mean that's the question is are you competing for the North or are you competing for the Stanley Cup, and where are you at? Yeah. And just quickly, so Matthew Tkachuk got in trouble again this week. Our friend Chucky. I have the hit that started all of this, and I am going to have a point here to get to. Here, let me. Oops, hang on, as I do my best Ron McLean impersonation.
You're
So
going
Ron
rogue
McLean-
again, are you?
I'm going rogue again. Here's the hit that caused fighting in Toronto. Let's see if we can get this here. It's Justin Hall's hit on Johnny Gaudreau. I'll show it one more time. First of all, everyone was mad at Matthew Tkachuk because well, first of all, people get mad at Matthew Tkachuk for this. Can we show the Zach Kassian hit, by the way?
Yep. I'll pull that up for you.
Sometimes it's better when I'm not Ron McLean. But we'll just show this. This is the Zach Kassian hit last night on Nikolai Ehlers. We'll play that back. I would love to hear the referee's opinion on this, but we'll go back. And I'll play this as we go through because Adam Lowry asked Zach Kassian to fight. Look, watch. Let's go. Oh, no, sorry, dude. Can't do it. Nope. Can't do it. I just coming back from a broken hand. But if that's Matthew Tkachuk, my God, is it a criminal rage on Twitter?
Yeah.
My God, is it a crime? He's called a rat. Justin
That's
Hall.
because he is one.
Yeah.
Justin Hall. Oh my goodness, the man has to fight twice. How dare he in that fine St. Pat's jersey that Justin Hall, has to fight twice for his hit? My goodness. But Matthew Tkachuk, if he denies a fight, everyone is crying out. That's hypocrisy, folks.
Matthew Tkachuk's reputation's well earned.
Yep. That is because of Matthew.
But Zach Kassian doesn't have that reputation.
Well, not
as much. No, not as much. He's not. Kassian is a hardworking player that plays physical and is a bit of a pest at times, but he doesn't have the history of that Tkachuk has, and the ability to troll that Tkachuk has, because that's a lot of what Tkachuk has done is stuff that's a little sneaky, a little dirty, that you catch because people get the clips like that and the gifs on online, and it gets play. Kassian hasn't had that. So as much as it is hypocrisy, yes, but guess what? We're dealing with, what did I talk about last episode about like how hockey fandom is emotional, especially when you get that stuff going. That's when the emotions run real high. That's when hockey gets real fun in terms of that. It's, and that whole lead up to the fight with Justin Hall was just weird. I don't know why Justin Hall was like didn't think that Tkachuk didn't want to fight. I don't know why Tkachuk decided that he had to make it as dramatic as he did by circling back that far. But it was just so awkward. So awkward. I can completely understand why Leafs fans were pissed off about that. I can completely understand why Flames fans are going, what was Justin Hall doing? Like that was like, it's depends on your perspective, right? And that's what makes that stuff. That's the color. That's the flavor. That's the spice that makes hockey fun.
The whole hit, I don't think was as bad as the Brandon Tanev hit on, I can't remember who now, but for Pittsburgh recently, that one, the player taking the hit, the impact with the boards, it was more of a defenseless situation, but they still fall under the category of boarding. So yeah, I reason with Flames fans for not liking the whole hit. On the Kassian thing, I mean, I don't think that was that late. I think Nick Ehlers just got caught admiring his pass there, or whatever play had just occurred, and Kassian hit him, and so why did for Kassian, why should he fight? Wasn't penalized, didn't think it was that dirty or anything, right? Why should he have to fight?
Okay, so if you but here, I guess here's the thing: there are fans out there, and Oiler. I'm going to say the McDavid camp, and some of the McDavid camp says you need to protect the stars.
Yeah.
And if you're if you think Johnny Gaudreau is a star in this league, and he's taking that hit. The ref there is expected, and McDavid takes a physical hits. There's an expected the ref is supposed to. We're not protecting the Stars, according to some, and it's the referee's job to protect the Stars. Is Nick Ehlers not a star in this league? By that, I'm just asking you from that argument.
I don't know. I know more or less of a star than Goudreau. I mean, he's not on the McDavid level of stardom.
No.
But
no, of course not. But
Kevin, the referees have trouble getting a consistent game as it is. Never mind. I mean, they're having trouble just with basics right now.
See, I guess that my point is on this is the way I think the better way to handle this is stand up for your teammates. Do what Matthew Tkachuk and Valimaki did. Mm-hmm. Do what Adam Lowry did. Just stand. If you don't like the hit, just stand up for your teammate.
Yeah, that's hockey.
I mean, that may seem a little old school for some, but I don't necessarily think it's the ref's job to be necessarily what number is that? Is that Connor McDavid or whatever? Like,
I know.
I don't think that's the ref's job. I don't like it.
That's my whole issue with we got to protect our stars. It's like, well, so are we applying two different standards to depending on caliber of player? I mean, the NBA does that, and I think it's a joke.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't agree with the idea that you have different standards depending on who the players are involved. Just call a consistent game. Just call it consistently.
Again, this was something that Kevin and I discussed beforehand. What makes hockey fun? What makes hockey different? What makes hockey special compared to all the other sports? It's fluid. It's fast. It's physical. It's chippy. You have the frontier justice is a part of hockey. You can argue whether or not it should be or not, but right now it's part of what makes hockey different and stand out and special to many people. Mm-hmm. And I think it does have a spot in the game. I think this as much as we don't want it to see too many fights end like the Jujar Kara fight, where he gets knocked out. We don't want to see that, but we want to see we want to see some piss and vinegar. We want to see the people like Matthew Tkachuk get his comeuppance at times when he deserves it, or have other players like Tom Wilson and stuff like that. We want to see them get their comeuppance. It's part of the entertainment factor of hockey. Now, is it irrational? Is it stupid? Is it you throw in all the science about brain injuries? Yes, there is so much stuff about that you have to, if you can separate your emotion from that and look at just the science and all that, yes, there's ways that maybe they shouldn't be involved. But emotionally and entertainment factor wise, and what makes hockey different and special to myself and others, I want that in there. I want the frontier justice. I want players to step up to their and protect their teammates. Will you go to, like, when we get back, be able to get back to go watch hockey games? Are there a large amount of people who are not emotionally charged, emotionally invested when a big hit happens and you have a teammate come in to defend the player who got hit, and you see a fight, a scrum, and all that? Yeah. Like I said, and I think it is and if you do end up having these special rules for your superstars, you are changing the game drastically more than you would and altering the game drastically more than anything else. Because who's a star, who's not a star? Like, what number? Like, as was said earlier, what number was that? Is that McDavid, or is that someone who has number 17 who isn't a star? So
yeah. And again, I'm going to say this. I know that some people were upset. I hated what happened to, like, the Kara hit on Shillington was a bad hit. But I really did not like what happened to Kara at the end of that fight. That was really tough to watch. And that's all I'm saying. And I'm not a big fan of how Kachuk handled the Justin Hall late punch there. Not a big fan of that either. But I think teammates standing up for teammates is my point in that conversation. And that's I mean, there's a line. Sometimes it's crossed. Unfortunately, we have to be careful. And I am honestly glad that Kara is okay, and hope he's back soon.
Yeah, I don't see that, sticking up for each other going away anytime soon. And, I mean, baseball season's starting up, and I don't see the end of beanballs happening anytime soon either. I mean, it's a similar situation. Pitchers get in there and they feel obligated. They got to stick up for their guys.
And I'm going to tell you right now, Blue Jay fans, if you don't think George Springer is going to be pitched at, it's still going to happen. A lot.
Oh yeah, he'll be thrown at inside for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's leave it there. Tuesday, we are scheduled to have the Sota Pod as we travel down south to talk about what's going on in the West. And will be interesting to hear after they got crushed by the Colorado Avalanche how they're feeling. So, and then Devin and I will hopefully get a little bit of a chat about the Calgary Flames in there. But how do we follow everyone?
I am Beardy Canucks 03 on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter at TNoble, TNOBLE.
I am at Schneid's on most social media.
Devin is GordHowe09. Maybe his dog will come on again, or Cat Carl will meow. I am KAVOLE, podcast_hockey as well, Facebook.com, YouTube.com. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We went 1 hour and 55 minutes with no swearing. Tyler's dad will be happy. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you all real soon.